So not everybody has to have really crappy offices in small accounting firms. They can be really nice. They can have fireplaces in the background. You can do whatever you want to do. So I still run an accounting firm every day. I also I'm the CEO of a company called Rootworks, and we are a group of about 500 accounting firms, CPA firms across the country. Christy's on that team, and we spend a lot of time trying to make firms look a lot better, practice a lot better, make a lot more money, and have much better work-life balance. And so we're going to spend some time today talking a little bit about that as well. So hopefully you understand the opportunities better. So really quickly, we're going to do an overview of what we consider the Great American Accounting Opportunity. We're going to talk about who some of the key stakeholders are in that. We're going to look at the profession at large just so you can understand what the accounting profession sort of looks like today. What are some of the challenges in the profession? What are some of the opportunities? What does a traditional accounting firm look like, and how is that completely different today? I got to tell you guys, my dad practiced before me, and there's no way in the world I would have wanted to be a part of that profession as it used to be. I've owned men's clothing stores. I've owned lamp companies. I love design. So everybody in the accounting profession, you don't have to be this stereotypical boring person. You can love design. You can love helping small businesses. You can love technology, and all that stuff comes together to make for a great accounting firm. We're going to talk about that as it relates to a next-generation accounting firm. And then what are some of the key success factors? So, Christy, does that sound fair enough today?
Yes, I think that'll cover everything.
That's a lot of stuff. All right, so you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, let me switch over. So let's talk about what the Great American Accounting Opportunity is in general. We say it's the opportunity to connect young professionals and students with those exiting the profession, and to enable young professionals to build an entrepreneurial and creative company. I'm going to say that again, an entrepreneurial and creative company. Two things that you typically don't think of in the accounting profession as it's been portrayed over the years. So we're going to talk to you about how that's quite a bit different today. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about who some of the key stakeholders are in this opportunity. Christy, I'm going to let you sort of talk through, if you don't mind, the four large pools of people that we're really talking about here real quick.
Well, the key stakeholders that we talk about in the Great American Accounting Opportunity are, first of all, the universities, college and universities. Clearly, the college and universities are a key part of this, and as students, you realize this. The other key group are you, the students, those getting ready to go out into the profession. Darren, I think you're looking to break that up, so people ready to graduate, and then the other group being professionals about 2 and 3 years out, those that have graduated, gone into the profession. And then the small firms clearly are the other stakeholder in this equation. And we bring up these stakeholders because up until this point, there has been a disconnect specifically between small firms and those graduating students and those professionals 2 and 3 years out, mainly because it's really the Big Four that has all the presence on the university campuses. And so this opportunity says if we connect these key stakeholders, then students will be opened up to all of the entrepreneurial opportunities available to them out there after they graduate, or 2 and 3 years into it after they've gotten the experience of the Big Four.
So I guest lecture pretty frequently at Indiana University, which is the picture in the top left. And in our business school, it's called the Kelley School of Business. It's a top-rated business school. The Big Four has a great presence there. I would say the top 10 firms in the country have a big presence there. But you'll see here in a little bit that that's not all of the firms. And so if you're not one of those top 10 firms, chances are the students don't know who you are. And so that's a challenge. The typical career path is you graduate, you do take a job at one of those top 10 firms, more than likely a Big Four firm. My daughter has her undergrad and MBA from Indiana, went to Ernst & Young, worked in their global consulting group for the last few years, and she starts with my firm, Root & Associates, on Thursday. So had she not known that what this profession looked like, at least from my perspective, that wouldn't have been that wouldn't have been a career path that she would have chosen, but she sees it from a different perspective, and that's what we're hoping you guys see it from. And then obviously, as Christy said, the small firms are big stakeholders. So let's look at what are some of the key issues with the stakeholders. As we said, as Christy mentioned, the universities, there's this big firm influence. They fund the parties, they fund the recruitment, they make contributions to the universities, they get the they get talked about. That's who you hear about. Faculty more than likely worked for a big firm for a few years and decided maybe that's not what they wanted to do. They went back and got their PhD, and they went back to work at the university. So they never really made the rounds through the other parts of the profession. So they're a bit unaware of what the opportunities are out there beyond the big firms. And then typically, even the accounting programs, they lack an entrepreneurial focus. I know we have an entrepreneurial school here at Indiana University, but that's really separate from the accounting program. So I think the accounting programs oftentimes lack the entrepreneurial focus that small firms sort of require. Then we look at the large firms. It's excellent business training. I started my career with Deloitte after I finished at Indiana. These big firms, Christy, it's kind of a very heady place to work. You're going to great offices in big cities. Everybody knows who everybody knows who Ernst & Young or Deloitte is, and it's kind of cool to start out with, to say that you're working for one of the big firms. But what happens, the reality is after you've been there for a little while being probably a year or more, it becomes a grind like anything else. And what we see is students or young professionals have a tendency of seeing themselves in those places long term. But whether it's work-life balance or whatever the case might be. And so we see that these big firms experience high turnover. Is that a fair assessment, Christy, from your perspective?
Yes, and I think one of the key things to mention here, too, is that clearly the experience that students get on a technical level is phenomenal. They're getting the skills they need to be a technician. What they won't tend to get, and this is where the disillusionment comes in, is they don't tend to be a voice. They don't tend to be one of the people who move the firm forward, be creative, be a visionary. To really do that, you have to go to a small firm to be able to be a voice and to be more empowered. So you get the technical training, disillusionment comes in because the creative part is not there, they find out.
Well, you get some technical training. The business that I'm in Root & Associates, our accounting firm, Christy, is vastly different than the business that Ernst & Young is in, the kind of clients we serve. I serve the pizza shop on campus. Ernst & Young serves, Fortune 500 companies. So, yes, it's great experience, but oftentimes those two different, it's almost like you're in two totally different professions. Does that make sense? Right. So, yes, it's good experience, but oftentimes the experience is not necessarily relevant. What I do find very relevant in the big firm training programs is the professionalism. It's just learning how to work in teams, how to network, things like that. Those are the things that you can carry over with you. You have to stay around a fairly decent amount of time with the big firm to actually get some of the great technical skill sets, like become a great auditor or a great tax person, things like that. Young professionals. So this other group, usually young professionals are looking for opportunities. Opportunities to really get fulfillment out of their career. Usually they're reasonably tech savvy. They don't understand the marketplace very well. They don't understand what the small firm marketplace looks like, and they kind of have a conditioned path that after they finish up with one of the big four firms, they go into industry, or they go off and create a company that's out of the profession altogether. So that's sort of what the young professionals do. In small firms, when we give you some demographics here in a minute of what small firms the makeup of small firms are. I think it'll be surprising to you. But what's nice about small firms is you have the ability as a young person to have an immediate impact on clients. You don't have to wait 2, 3, 4 years to start having the ability to talk to clients. Typically, you have an immediate impact because there's not a lot of people in the small firm. You have to have an immediate impact. You definitely have more control over your future, your growth potential, your progression. You have more control over. There is a small firm in every city in America, I would guess, hazard to say, and multiples in almost every city in America. So you can live and work about anywhere you want to. Small firms have this sort of entrepreneurial spirit, you know, we live in such a changing time with technology and the sort of this world is flat mentality where, you know, a small firm can look very big as it relates to the internet. You can connect with clients all over the country and even all over the world. So what we're seeing now is this really interesting entrepreneurial spirit in small firms of being very creative in how they go about growing their businesses. And then small firms, you can be very brand savvy. You know, Root & Associates, we have a great brand. Rootworks, we have a great brand. One of the things Rootworks does is we create brands for small firms. So small firms are starting to think about what is a great brand. And how do I create one of those? And then small firms can be incredibly financially rewarding, as you guys will see here in a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about money. So those are the benefits that I believe we see in the small firms. So let's take a look, Christy, for a minute at the profession at large. What makes up the profession? You know, there's about 138,000 what we would call practice units in the country. Of which, of those 138,000, so these are not CPAs. These are what we call practice units. So they're a firm of some sort. Okay, of those 138,000, about 45,000 of them are members of the AICPA. Now, there's a number of CPA firms out there that are not a member of the AICPA. They choose not to be for whatever reason. But of the 138,000, 45,000 of them are members of the CPA, of the AICPA. So that means, don't want to ask you to do the math, Christy, but somewhere around, what do we say, the difference between 138 and 45, whatever that is, off the top of your head, those are typically sort of bookkeeping and tax firms, not necessarily licensed by and large to practice. You know, really, you don't have to have a license to practice accounting necessarily. You don't have to have a license to do financial statements. You do have to have a license to do an audit. You do have to have a license to do a review, but you don't have to have a license to do bookkeeping and payroll and tax returns and those sort of things. So there's an awful lot of those firms out there, people who just started businesses around bookkeeping, tax, financial statement preparation, helping small businesses that are not licensed CPAs. What gets really interesting here is of those 45,000, okay, of those 45,000 CPA firms, less than 2,000 of them have more than 50 employees. So, Christy, you can kind of bank on the 138,000 minus the 45,000. That group of people are all going to have fewer than 10 employees for the most part. Okay. Of the CPA firms, the 45,000, only 2,000 or more, less than 2,000 of them, less than 2,000 of them have more than 50 employees. And what's really interesting is 94% of them have fewer than 10 employees, 94% of the 45,000. I believe it's close to 100% of the bookkeeping and tax firms and 94% of the CPA firms. So you can see that the marketplace is made up of small firms, boutique firms. So when you are in school and you're thinking, wow, the accounting profession are these big organizations, the reality is that's absolutely not true. Is that your sort of take on this whole thing, Christy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's why, one of the key issues that you mentioned for the key stakeholders being the students is that lack of awareness. Just think about, it's 94% lack of awareness when it comes to the biggest part of the market.
Right. You don't know about 94% of the marketplace. It's actually much higher than 94%. It's probably closer to 99% or 98% of the marketplace that students are unaware of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, every 2 years there's this thing called the MAP survey. MAP stands for Management of an Accounting Practice. Okay, so there's a survey that the AICPA, in conjunction with the Texas CPA Societies, conducts. And there's some key findings that come out of this that I think are interesting. There's this sort of misnomer out there that accountants work all the time. And I would agree with you that some accountants work an awful lot. But it doesn't have to be you. You can choose to do this differently. In this MAP survey, we rate what we call the top 25% of firms. And the top 25% of firms are defined in the survey as how you use technology and the amount of income per partner that is made in that firm. So you could quite literally be a sole proprietor, working by yourself, make a lot of money, use technology really well, and be in what we call the top 25% of firms. Okay? Has nothing to do with size. It's about profitability and use of technology and the relationship of those. The top 25% of partners in the firms that we looked at actually work 3% fewer hours a year. Again, doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if your normal work year is 2,000 hours, then it's 60 hours less a year, so it's a week and a half off more a year. What's really interesting, and what will probably catch people's, or at least students' attention, is those same group of people, by using technology smarter, you're actually making a lot more money. So those people are earning about 72.5% more money than the rest of the accountants. You know, with an average annual income of $450,000. That's the average annual income of the top 25%. So again, you could be a sole proprietor, adopting technology well, running a good firm, and make really good money. And we'll show you how that sort of plays out a little bit more here in a minute. But that's a pretty attractive statistic, don't you think, Christy?
Absolutely. And a highly unknown.
Highly unknown. You know, in my accounting firm, we specialize in working with physicians. So a lot of doctors. And, you know, the medical community is going through a lot of change. Certainly with the Affordable Care Act and everything that's going on, there's lots of, it's a very much a changing environment. I have very few of the physicians, and we probably do work for over 100 of them in Bloomington. I have very few of them that make $450,000 a year. And they're on call at night. They have student loans of $250,000 or more. They went to school for probably 8 to 10 years. So when you start thinking about the accounting profession, a 5-year degree, where you can actually really, you're not on call on weekends, you're not on call at night. You can actually build a company, you know, the way you want to build that and be in control and make that kind of money, it ought to be pretty enticing to a young person. What's really interesting, Christy, is that we've had this. There's this. We're going through this period of time calling the gray. It's called the graying of the profession. What we saw was that for years, you know, the profession has existed, but then we went from a 4-year degree to a 5-year degree, and we saw enrollment drop during that period of time in the accounting programs. Okay, people setting for the CPA exam. That has come way back up now. But in that wall, what we found was that we are now, all these baby boomers are the guys and gals that are running firms, and they're all in that late 50s, 60s, up to 70 years old, and 75% of those leaders, 75% of that whole profession, the leadership of the profession is set to retire in the next 8 years. That's a huge shift. So we're talking about people running these small firms that have really strong incomes, that can run a business any way they want from any city in America, 75% of those people are set to retire in the next 8 years. From my perspective, Christy, that creates a phenomenal opportunity, certainly for our listeners today. If you're a student today or you're a young professional today that's been out of school for a year, 2 or 3, what we have right now is we have all these practitioners that are running these small firms that are looking for people like you to come into their firms, but they don't know how to find you because they're not on campuses. We've got you in school over here, and the university is not talking about small firms, so you don't know these small firms exist. So it's places like Accounting Fly that helps bring these groups together. But I think oftentimes what happens is young people don't know why they would want to be a part of one of these small firms, and we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about that. So as we said, there's some really big opportunities out there right now. You know, if you're a student thinking about career options today, you should be thinking about finding, even if you're planning on going into one of the big 4 firms or one of the top 10 firms or even one of the top 100 firms, if that career path doesn't pan out to be what you want to do, what I want you to understand is there's career path options for you. You can, instead of leaving the profession, you can go work at a small firm, make really good money, have a great work-life balance, be a very tech-savvy sort of business with a great brand, and take that firm over within a few years. That's a great option today. If you're a firm owner today approaching retirement, which is probably not the majority of our listeners today, probably not any of our listeners today, they ought to be looking for you. You've got to figure out a way to connect with these people and know who these people are in the community that you want to live in. If you're a practitioner out there today in the middle of your career, again, probably not any of our listeners today, but somebody in the middle of their career, that's a great opportunity for you to connect with those people and learn from them over the next 5 to 10 years how to run that company or how to be a professional, so that you're in a position to take that firm over when you're ready. Or if you're a young professional today, now's the time to really be thinking about what does this profession look like and how can you have a big impact on it. So the challenges. You know, the challenges, as we kind of mentioned, each group of stakeholders here don't know that the other exist. What do you see, Christy, some of the biggest challenges are?
Well, like we said earlier, it's trying to bridge that gap. Jeff said earlier, you know, students just aren't aware of, as we've determined, 94, probably likely more like 99% of the market. So when they get to that point in the big firm where they've gotten the experience they want and they're a little disillusioned by the career track, where do they turn? If we can connect up front, they know where to turn. They'll have that network. They have things like Accounting Fly to be able to find those people. But the biggest challenge right now is just the disconnect. There's an enormous gap of information out there, so the students just don't know where to go. Some of these students might want to start out at a small firm, you know, a cool, progressive, brand-savvy firm where they can not only be part of building the profitability, they can be part of building the brand too, because that's a big opportunity too. These kids are tech-savvy, they're creative. They just don't have a technician degree. They're just not going to go and produce tax returns. They want to help build a business. So if we can get them connected, they can actually, those who want to, start out in a small firm and build their career from there, become a partner, you know, get their feet wet with entrepreneurial work. I mean, there's a ton of opportunity if we can fill the gap.
You don't have to graduate and go to one of the big firms. I mean, there's a career path straight into small firms. As I mentioned, oftentimes the experience that you gain in the big firm, if your idea is that I'm just going to get some experience, yes, that experience is definitely helpful, but it's not critical. If your choice was, hey, I'm going to get my feet wet in a small firm, you know, like I said before, the kind of work you do in a small firm is tremendously different than the kind of work that you do at a big firm. But what I want, I think, and the remainder of our time today, Christy, is for our listeners to really understand is what are the pieces of a small firm and what is the income and revenue potential really look like over there. So let's start by taking a look at, what are the opportunities to create an entrepreneurial company? My small firm, we do maybe a couple $1 million a year in annual revenues, which is a decent size small firm. I think inside my accounting firm, we have 11 people, and we do a couple $1 million a year in revenue. So typically a small firm of 4 or 5 staff people in a small firm would have target revenues of about $1 million. And again, that's not hard to get to. If I were to open up a firm today, Christy, I would go find the kind of clients that I want to do work for. I would find them in such a way that I offered my services completely online, where we could collaborate in real time, all those things, by using my website, some mobile apps, and all that stuff. I could find $1 million worth of business, I think, within a year or two, if I were to start over and do this again.
Right.
Typically, what you have in a small firm that's run well is they put about 40% of their total revenue to the bottom line. Since I'm sure we have an awful lot of accounting students online, they've probably already done the math and realize that net compensation to that owner, that partner of a firm of 5 can be around $400,000 a year. That should be incredibly enticing to a young person. If I were to create this business again, Christy, if I were to say, I'm going to start my firm all over again, I'm going to go grow to $1 million, in my world, I would probably do that without even doing tax returns. Typically in a small firm, your months are pretty consistent. And then you run into what is normally known as busy season or tax season, and you have this big peak because a firm will typically do a whole bunch of tax returns for people. That's what causes a lot of long hours. But if you're a firm that doesn't do audits, so there's no peak season there, which most small firms do not do audits, okay? If you're a firm that only does tax returns for your business clients, then your workload throughout the year is pretty level. In my case, in my accounting firm, I only work probably less than 10% of my time in my accounting firm because I spend the majority of my time running Rootworks. But if I were even full-time in my accounting firm, my average work week would probably be 35 to 40 hours, okay, if I were spending my time over there. So when you can get into a business that you can be entrepreneurial in, you don't have to grow it that big, and you can make that kind of money, that should be interesting, okay? One of the big keys here is you can have as much life-work balance as you want. I raised 3 kids. My oldest is 28, daughter's 26, my youngest is 21. He's a student at Indiana University now. There's this common theme about going to IU here in our family, Christy. I know you're up in Michigan, but it's a much better place. I know you weren't buying that, were you?
Not at all.
But there is this, I could work as much or as little as I choose to work. It all depends on how you set the practice up for yourself. If you set up a business that depends on you to do all the work, you're going to work a lot of hours. If you set up a business that is not dependent upon you doing all the work, which is something that we teach in Rootworks, you can have as much life-work balance as you want. So the key is having a vision, which we'll talk a little bit more about, of the kind of firm that you want to have. So as I mentioned before, creating $1 million firm is a very attainable thing. So more than anything, I want you guys as students to understand what the opportunity is in the small firm space. As I mentioned, it really all starts with your vision. What is it that you want to create? The typical attributes of a traditional accounting firm is it's a very, when I grew up in this business, Christy, my dad practiced before me. What I saw was he got up at 4 a.m., he drove to his office. At that time, we had hand ledgers, and they had the green eye shades, the pocket protectors, worked long hours during tax season. You know, there was no such thing as technology to speak of. You know, even when I started my career, we didn't have email, we didn't have text messages, we didn't have mobile devices. So it hasn't been that long, right, ago. So all the work was performed in the office, so you had to be behind your desk. Everybody really worked off of PCs at some point. This concept of platform independence, or working in the cloud, or working from a mobile device, or working from a Mac really didn't exist, okay? There was paper everywhere, lots of paper in the traditional accounting firm, file cabinets everywhere. There really weren't standardized processes and procedures. It was just kind of a whole bunch of stuff. Nothing was really standardized because there was no real technology that allowed you to create a lot of standardization. There was really very little, if any, digital presence, and it was certainly unsophisticated. And the idea of a brand was your sign hanging out front. That was the traditional accounting firm. That's how the profession existed for 100 years. Okay. Then technology hit, and when I say when technology hit, it was when I started with Deloitte. We didn't have a computer in the firm in Indianapolis where I worked. I went and picked up our first machine. That's what made me the technology expert. So that was 30 years ago. So all this change has come in the last 30 years. So what we're seeing is change took off sort of slowly, and now we're seeing this huge curve of change and the adoption ramping up really quickly. Okay, so if I were sitting here trying to sell you on being a part of a traditional accounting firm, that would be difficult. If I were saying you have lots of compliance and transaction entry work, you're going to work long hours, you're going to do it on a PC sitting behind a desk, there's going to be paper everywhere. You got to make up your own processes. There is no such thing as using your mobile device in the firm, and your brand is your logo on a business card. I would want to probably throw up, Christy. So that would not be a profession that I would want to be part of. Would you agree with that?
I would, and it's such a good point that's part of why the disconnect still exists today, is that I still believe the majority of people stereotype the small firm with the list that you have right here, and that's just not the case. Small firms are playing, in the same playing field as large firms because of technology, and there are a good many of that percentage of small firms that are in the digital age firmly, working in the cloud, working remotely, using their website as a place to do business, portals, online real-time collaboration with clients, so you're more than a document deliverer, you're actually a trusted business advisor, you're helping small businesses in every aspect of their business. Again, it's all about the education and getting people away from the stereotype and understanding what a real small firm looks like today to help repair that disconnect.
Yeah, and television doesn't do the accounting space any justice. I mean, they promote this sort of stereotype. But let's take a look then of what the attributes are, as Christy was mentioning. What are some of the attributes of what we call a next generation accounting firm? So what can a firm look like? What does Root & Associates look like? What does a lot of our Rootworks members look like, Christy? We have 500 of them out there, and their attributes are significantly different. So let's kind of walk down through those. These firms have a clear vision of the kind of firm they want to have. So they're saying, I want to be tech savvy. I want to be able to work anytime, anywhere from any device. Christy knows where my favorite place to work is from. I usually send her, I usually video chat with her when I'm there. It's usually on the beach at my place on Longboat Key off the coast of Sarasota. So I sit on the beach, sit there, look at the ocean, work on my MacBook Pro, and I can do anything I can do in the office. So having a vision, go ahead.
We wrote a lot of your book together while you were on the beach.
The last book I wrote, the majority of it was sitting on the beach. So having the vision that's the way I want to run my firm, that's important. Maybe I'm not going to be there all the time, but maybe I'm back and forth between Bloomington and there. Maybe I travel internationally. Whatever I want to do, I ought to be able to do it the way that I want to do it. And with technology today, we can. So that's having a vision of the kind of firm you want to have. having a focused business model. So a focused business model is about standardization. As Jeff mentioned when we kicked off today, they're doing a session, I believe, tomorrow on Xero. Xero, which is XREO.com, is an accounting application that's a cloud-based accounting application. Well, a business model would say that I want all my clients using this collaborative system so that my staff can be really good at this, and we are delivering and collaborating in real time all the time with our firms. QuickBooks Online does that. Everything that's being developed by software developers today is focused on running across all platforms on any device. So that's the ability to develop a focused business model. You want services in this next generation accounting firm that can be leveraged through recurring revenue. So just think about anything that you sign up for today. Anything you sign up for today wants you to essentially give them your credit card so they can charge you monthly. That happens to you all the time, doesn't it, Christy?
Mm-hmm.
That you want to sign up for Dropbox, they want your credit card, they want to charge, they'll give you a freemium, they'll give you a free small account, but they want you to upgrade, whether it's LinkedIn or whatever it is. They're trying to get you in a recurring revenue model, okay, that can be leveraged, right? Leveraged through technology in their case. Well, think about doing the same thing in the accounting profession. Let's get our clients in a recurring revenue model where they're paying us monthly, where we can leverage that work to staff that can do that besides me, or that we can use technology to help leverage that. Think about getting the right kind of clients that actually fit in your business model. Not just saying, hey, I have an accounting firm, I'm going to open my doors to whoever wants to walk in, then I've got to figure their stuff out. No, say, I'm going to go get the clients that I know how to work on, that my firm knows how to do. That's who I'm going to put in my business model, and I'm going to say no to any client that doesn't fit that, so that you're working in a system all the time. So you want to build this digital delivery system too, so where your clients, you, whomever has access to information anytime, anywhere, any device. We haven't had paper in our office since 1999, so for 15 years. We don't have a file cabinet in our office. Firms are paperless today. We deliver all documents to our clients digitally through portals. There's this concept of printing tax returns and handing them to clients only exists in dated firms today. It should be available on any device. You should be able to develop a compelling brand, a brand that can be leveraged not only in Bloomington for me, but leveraged across the Midwest or across the country. If I want to pick up docs across the country, which we do have. We have clients in Colorado, we have clients in New York that are medical groups. So our brand extends well beyond the borders of Bloomington. And then we can develop a strong marketing strategy. So you could take and plug each of these things. If I took the word, Christy, at the top, next generation accounting firm, off, and I said next generation marketing firm or next generation branding firm or next generation cool firm, whatever that is, these would be the exact same characteristics, I believe, that we'd be looking for. All we're doing is applying something that's really fun, that's very entrepreneurial to the accounting profession. Am I missing anything there, Christy?
No, I think you covered everything.
Cool. But what I'm wanting our listeners to see is this as a real, we have hundreds of firms doing this today, don't we?
We do. We have 500 or so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they've been very successful at it. So, you know, Christy, you and I and a few other of our team members sat down and we said, you know, we've been talking about a next generation accounting firm now for 7 or 8 years. We actually wanted to get a definition down that people can really hold on to. And what we said a next generation accounting firm is, it's a business built on focused intention with unmitigated entrepreneurial spirit that enables you to have the life you want to live, essentially. So we want you to, we want a next generation accounting firm to be this place that you come into each day and you just feel really passionate about creating a great place to be. It runs on a business model that supports an environment that can be where you can be present in all aspects of your personal, professional lives and have the greatest impact on your family, staff, clients, and community. So this idea of being present, and this may be a little hard for our listeners to understand, but maybe not. When you get out into the business world and you have small children and you have a spouse, significant other, and all this stuff is coming at you, activities and everything and business and life all at the same time. I'm sure you guys can relate to this with your parents. You know, just stuff is coming at you all the time. It gets really difficult to be present in all the things that you're trying to do. So you've got to be able to effectively put those things in the right buckets and have the right life-work balance. When you have the pressure of running a business that you don't love, that depends totally on you, sometimes that gets out of control for a lot of people. So what we're saying a next generation accounting firm is a firm where you don't allow that to happen. It's a business that operates independent of you, which is one of the ways you don't allow that to happen. It creates a better working culture for your firm, offers security through this recurring revenue that we discussed, fosters creative thinking, not something that you typically think about in the accounting profession in the old world, but there's a ton of creative thinking that goes on inside of an accounting firm today. It evokes excitement with each new stage of evolution as you evolve through your career, inspires the next generation of professionals, and is built for transition to support your legacy. So the company that you build, this next generation accounting firm, no matter what phase you're at in your life, if you're in the early phase of your life, you ought to be able to work at it the way you want to. So if you want to travel early on before you have kids and all that stuff, you ought to be able to do that. You ought to be able to work at it differently as you get into the family period of your life. You ought to be able to work at that differently as you become an empty nester. I just became an empty nester essentially a couple of years ago. I want to work from a lot of different places, not just from Bloomington. So your firm ought to support that. And then if you do have family or other people, young people that want to come in later on as you evolve out of your career, it should support that. So Christy, we spent an awful lot of time getting down to 3 paragraphs, but I think this is a pretty good representation. Again, you really don't see the word accounting in there, so this could describe any small business. This could describe a tech company that you're going to create. As we mentioned, you know, your goal ought to be one of these top firms. Again, top firm doesn't mean you're the smartest. Top firm doesn't mean you work the most. Top firm means that you're working the smartest, though, okay? That you have a vision. That's how you get into this top 25% so that you can make a lot more money. Why are people not doing as well why do we have those 75% that are not making it in the top 25%? We've narrowed it down to 5 reasons, and I'll go through these fairly quick because we have about 7-8 minutes left. The number one reason that firms are challenged today is they really lack a clear vision of what they want to accomplish. We've talked about this, but they really lack this clear vision. So my advice to you guys as you head off into your career, make sure you have a clear vision of what it is that you want to accomplish. The second one, most small firms have always taken on any client that would come through their door. If you have the opportunity to get in and run a small firm, be very clear about who your ideal client is and take on ideal clients. Typically when I ask small firm owners today, once you define what an ideal client is, how many ideal clients do you have in your firm? Usually it's about 20% of the firm client base. Usually, Christy, 80% of the firm's clients are not ideal clients. They're just, they built their firm out of necessity, out of taking on clients because they needed to take on clients. And there was ever this point where they said, hey, we have enough clients, we ought to just have ideal clients at this point. And that presents a lot of challenges to small firms. Number 3, most firms, I wouldn't just say small firms, I would say firms in general, whether it's a big 4 or a small firm, really lack business models. They really don't, they don't create a system for every service and have every client follow their system. And that's what we're talking about. And then we've been evolving with technology over the last 30 years. So there's been a lot of change. and there continues to be a lot of change in technology, and there will continue to be a lot of change in technology. What we're finding today is the technology that's being created has a much tighter level of integration than we've seen in the past. So firms are starting to adopt a much more tightly integrated system, which is a good thing. And then the last piece is most firms, these guys that are retiring, this 75% of firms that are owners that are retiring, they haven't taken the time to invest in a quality brand, web, mobile solutions, marketing plan in order to even cultivate the ideal client. So these are all the fun things of running a firm. These are the things I love to do. I love working on our brand. I love working on our web presence, our mobile presence. I love working on our marketing strategy. That's where Christy shines in spades, is developing marketing strategies so that we get the right kind of clients. So Rootworks is not an accounting firm. It's a company that helps accounting firms. So we build brands, we build websites, we build marketing material, we build technology, we build our own tech solutions. We have a learning center, so we teach. So it couldn't be farther away from running an accounting firm. And yet, Christy, we spend all of our time doing these things, working on our brand, working on our web and mobile solutions, working on our marketing plan, and trying to get the ideal customer into Rootworks, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But I mean, I think it's important to mention, too, is that, you know, we were able to figure all this out in Rootworks to help other firms because you did it in your CPA firm. So you lived that life of having to overcome those obstacles and figure things out and systematize. So you've got that CPA, and you still run an accounting firm. So you continue to keep up with technology. But yes, in Rootworks, that is exactly what we do.
So those are the top 5 challenges that we see these small firm owners dealing with. But we think that the young people coming out of school today, young professionals that are leaving the big firms today, are very brand savvy. We believe they're web savvy and mobile savvy. We believe they understand the idea of marketing. And we believe that they want to have life-work balance. So we think the profession is ripe for you to come in. We just want you to understand what the opportunities are, whether it's financial or just loving the job that you have. So with that, you know, vision plus creativity and technology in our profession equals success. As Christy mentioned, authored a book. This is the most we have 3 out there, but this is the most recent. It's called The Intentional Accountant, Your Roadmap for Building a Next Generation Accounting Firm. If you get a chance, you can pick this up on Amazon, download it to your iPad, your Kindle. Gives you some insights, not only in just running an accounting firm, but just running a small business, understanding what it's like to be an entrepreneur and what the challenges are and what to do about that. Jeff, I think we're running out of time. What I'm going to do is go ahead and really skip over this one and hand it back to you.
Darren and Christy, you know, I think that the audience, the students and young professionals who are on our call would probably agree with me that this is something that, I mean, there's 250,000 accounting students in the U.S. and they need to hear this message. I'm sure you would agree with that because it's important when you're getting out of college or starting your career or transitioning into an accounting career that this is an important opportunity that you need to know about. But also, let's say you do go to a large firm and you leave after a couple of years. The small firm market is lucrative. It can be progressive. It can be very exciting. It's very important, and I really appreciate you telling the story. We do only have 2 minutes, but there's a couple really important questions I'd like to ask on behalf of the audience.
Okay.
So if we go a minute or 2 over, hopefully that's okay with you guys. The question I got most often, Darren, was, okay, so I'm interested. Now, how do I approach a small firm? And as much as I'd like to say that every small firm that's going to hire somebody is on accounting fly, they're not. And so you mentioned earlier there's a small firm or small firms in every town in America. Talk about practical advice. How should students approach these small firms to engage them? Because I feel like that's what it's going to take.
You know, what's interesting, Jeff, is these small firm owners want to hear from the students worse than the student wants to talk to the small firm owner. They are looking, I liken it back in college, you know, any girl that would talk to me, I always wanted to talk to them, right? So maybe not a good analogy, but I was always open to talk. Them maybe not so much so, but these small firm owners want to talk to these students. What I would do if I were looking to live in Bloomington, Indiana, I would do a Google search and find out who the accountants are in Bloomington. And I would get familiar with who the ones that are pretty tech savvy are. You can do that by just looking at their websites. You can figure that out. I would make a list. And what's really interesting is you don't necessarily have to go to the tech savvy firm, Jeff. If you go to the guy or gal that's not so much so, and you can help them think about, you know, what being tech savvy would look like, maybe that's the firm you want to buy. Maybe it's the firm that's not so tech savvy, where you have the ability to come in and buy that firm and do those sort of things. So depends on what you want to accomplish, but I think I would start with just getting a lay of the land in any community that you want to go to. Who are the players? Because in Bloomington, we're a town of 120,000 people, of which 45,000 of them are students here. So let's say we have 75,000 people left. There's probably 10 or 12 what I would consider good small firms in town. So it's the quantity is not unlimited. You can quantify who they are and what they're doing.
Right. The second most popular question I got was, well, small firms don't train. You know, they don't have formal training programs like the large firms do, and they're right. My guess your answer is going to be that who needs training when you're working in a small firm, because you're thrown into the deep end and learn how to be an accountant. But what are your thoughts about the lack of formal training inside small firms, Darren?
There's absolutely a lack of formal training inside of small firms, Jeff, as you know. What you want to do is figure out how to connect. It's one of the reasons we started Rootworks, Jeff, because there's this lack of business training inside of small firms. We help firm owners think about how to build their companies, but there's this technical piece too. So there's this business piece, and then there's the technical piece. The technical piece is just repetition. It's just doing it. You got to. I can't learn well enough how to do a tax return by taking college courses. I can't learn well enough by doing continuing education. I learned how to do 1040s or business tax returns by doing them and by having somebody sort of mentor you to do that. And that's just a function of doing it. Then there's this whole business side, and I believe the training for that comes from a number of different places. You can get it from a company like Rootworks. You can get it from reading books. I mean, two of the best books out there that I would recommend everyone online read is the E-Myth, the traditional E-Myth book by Michael Gerber, and the other one is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Those two books probably have had the biggest impact on me personally and professionally. I would say neither one of them are business books. They're both life books. So if you would approach them from that perspective, they will have tremendous impact on your business, but they'll have an even bigger impact on your life and your thinking. So reading, having a mentor, getting involved with a company that can help you think about the business pieces.
All right, last question, because we're over now. But what are the niches that you would recommend small accounting firms focus on if they get started? Think about people who are about to start a 30, 40-year career. Any ideas about niches that would be
You're cutting out real bad, Jeff. I don't know if that's
how about now? You hear me now?
Is he cutting out to you, Christy?
Okay.
Robot.
Yep, hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on. Hey, Darren, can you hear me now?
narrowing down. We'll see if he hops back on here in a second because we are running out of time.
Yes.
We'll see if Jeff gets back
Darren,
on here.
Can you hear my audio now?
Yep, I can.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I'll jump into that last question real quick. Is the students who are on the call today may have 30, 40-year careers in accounting. What niches should they be thinking about focusing on? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really do, Jeff. Service. We're a service-based economy. Service-based businesses is where it's at today. That's your doctors, attorneys, engineers, restaurants, real estate partnerships. Pretty much everywhere you look around, wherever you're at, you're seeing service-based businesses. It's your network engineers, it's your web developers, it's anybody that's providing a service, again, which we're in a service-based economy. Most of those businesses operate very much the same, so it allows you to standardize. They typically have cash flow to pay you, and their work is pretty straightforward by and large.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Darren and Christy, I guess you can't see me. I can't see you now as we wrap things up. Otherwise, I'd be waving goodbye to you. But we had a couple other questions that I thought you might want to take a look at. If it's okay with you, I'll email them to Christy that I wasn't able to get to. Is that okay with you guys?
That'd be great.
That's fine.
Thank you so much. And thank you for walking us through this today. It won't be the last time that we are telling this story together, I have a feeling, as long as you'll keep joining us. And thanks to the audience for being a part of today's session. I have a feeling you have piqued a lot of interest, and hopefully our audience will be seeing some more blog posts, social media posts that come out from Rootworks in the future. So Darren and Christy, I just want to thank you both so much for spending your time with us today, okay?
Our pleasure. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, everyone, for attending. Thanks, Christy.
Thanks for having us. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
All right. Bye-bye.